Yep.
You are live.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to meeting number 13 of Region 6 Steering Committee for the Louisiana Watershed Initiative. Glad you're all here. I'm calling the meeting to order at 10:05, and I'm turning over to Mr. Garden for roll call. Pat?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Okay, we're going to start off with Ascension Parish, David Wheel. Are you present, Dave? Assumption Parish, John Boudreau.
I'm here.
John, I see you there.
Hey, I'm here.
Well, John, I know you're on, so I'm going to check you. I see you. Andrew Barron is not going to be able to make it today. Iberia Parish, Scott Saunier.
Hello, this is Andrew Barron.
John Clark with Iberville.
Oh,
I can hear John. Something's wrong with our volume. Clark's. Okay. John.
John again, let's see if that works.
John, can you say something?
Hey, I'm here.
Okay, thank you, John. Apparently we're having some technical difficulties on our end. So let's try that again with Scott Saunier from Iberia Parish. Scott. Okay. Iberville, John Clark.
John Boudreau.
Now, didn't we see John on? We did?
Yeah, John Boudreau was on the call.
John Clark.
Yeah.
Okay. Jefferson, I know that Michelle Gonzalez. Michelle? All right. Now, I know that Amanda with Lafouche has called in and said she couldn't make it. Do we have anybody from New Orleans? I know Emile Pellegrin or
Amelia.
Amelia.
Theo Sanders is here.
Theo, okay, we're gonna take that. Thank you, Theo. Appreciate it. And,
hello, hello. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, Pat. This is Andrew Barron. I'm on the phone here. I just wanted to call in on my phone. I can't make it on Zoom on my computer, but so this is Andrew Barron representing Barataria Terrible Sway Program.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
I got you marked down as present. Appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.
Plaquemine Parish, Mike Metcalf.
I'm with you.
Thank you, Mike. And Point Coupé, Mark Ward.
I'm here, Pat.
Thank you, Mark. From St. Charles, Earl Mathern.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you, Earl. St. James, Merrill McCary. Merrill?
Here.
Thank you. And from St. John the Baptist Parish, Renee. Renee, are you with us? Thank you. From St. Martin, Casey Corville indicated that they wouldn't be able to make it unless he's on. St. Mary Parish, Tim Mott.
I'm present.
Thank you, Tim. Terrible, Mark Black.
Here.
And West Baton Rouge Parish, Kevin Durr.
Present, Pat. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, Mr. Chairman, it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You have 11 present. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Garden. Next item on the agenda is the review and adoption of the minutes of the April 28th, 2021 meeting. I think everybody should have received an advance copy of the minutes. Right, Mr. Gordon?
Correct.
Okay, so.
They were sent out. Adam sent them out. I was on vacation. Adam sent them out last week with
Okay.
the invite.
So I will, on the basis of that, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the minutes as they are written.
This is Earl. You got that motion?
Thank you, Earl. Is there a second?
Morel seconds.
Thank you. Any objections to adoption of the motion? Hearing none, so ordered. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the subcommittee update. I'll turn it over to Adam LaFour.
So our last meeting was April 14th, and I gave the report last meeting. We're starting to plan for our June meeting. We're having them pretty much every other month. So that's an update from us.
Thank you, Adam. Short and sweet. Next item is scoring of round one regional projects. Mr. Gordon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As y'all are aware, we had sent out a survey and asked all the steering committee members which option they'd like to go with, and on the scoring of projects that would come our way out of the $5 million. We had decided to pick 3 categories and score them on our own. So the 3 categories were effectiveness in minimizing risk, project cost and implementation, and social benefits. And then of course, any of the projects that exceed 5 million, then we go to the next eligible project. Now, I sent this to the state, and this is the response that I got back from Nicolette, and she is on the line right now. So if there's any questions regarding this, I'm sure she can indicate her reasoning for this. But OCD has received the Region 6 Steering Committee's proposed method for recommending and has determined that proposal adopted by the committee would not provide adequate justification for the selection or recommendation of these projects that do not receive the highest scores according to the state scoring process. Specifically, the scoring process outlined by the steering committee uses the same objective criteria that the state will be using to score and award projects, and does not provide any distinguishing priorities of Region 6, nor a method of quality or quantify those priorities when making the community's funding recommendation. As an alternative, if the committee were to prioritize the 3 outlined criteria, for example, effectiveness in minimizing risk, project costs, and implementation and social benefits, and weigh the state allocated scores for these 3 categories above and the other 2 categories, then this would represent a unique priority for Region 6, and that could be accepted as adequate justification. So, and you know, that was one of the selections on the survey, was to use the state scoring with some of these categories. But the steering committee had chose to go with scoring on their own using the state's categories. So at this point, I mean, the state's coming out with the projects tomorrow. So we really don't have much time. I would suggest that we just go ahead and utilize the conditional approval, basically, that OCD has given us in this email.
Let me make sure I understand that, Pat. The 3, we're okay on the 3 criteria, that is effectiveness in minimizing risk, project cost and project implementation, and social benefits, right? Okay. Now, I think we had discussed maybe selectively using some of the numerical subcategories, but the state would prefer us to use all of those numerical subcategories such that we would use a maximum score of 44 for effectiveness in minimizing risk, instead of what I think we looked at, maybe a total of 26 points. which is fine. I mean, I think it takes all these other numerical criteria into consideration. And I don't have a problem with that. Instead of 100 points, we'd be looking at 50, what, 67, something like
Yes,
that.
sir. That's correct.
So I'm good with that. Do any of the members have any comments they'd like to make about that? I don't think we need to put it to a vote necessarily, because we kind of already did that.
Yeah, we brought it to a vote, and basically the state has sent back a response indicating that, our method of doing the scoring is acceptable as far as the categories, but we have to use, it's condition that we use the state scoring. So.
Okay. I'm good with that. Does
I
anybody
have
have
some
any
thoughts. Hey, this is Renee. I have some thoughts on that. I would like a little more clarification from OCD. The original policies and procedures did state that the region would be submitted a list of eligible projects for consideration with encouragement of regional priorities to be established, and that the projects selected by the regional committee must be justified in writing. So this seems contrary to what was originally presented to the committee.
I would agree, Renee. It's Kevin Durden, West Baton Rouge. I'm having a little heartburn over. I feel like it seems to me on the surface, I don't know if it's true or not, that in this response that OCD said that they're trying to micromanage the work of the region. And I would like some clarification on that as well.
And this is Nicolette. So what the state received from how we interpreted your recommendation was that you were going to use the state's criteria to score the projects. The policies and procedures say that if the region decides to choose a project that is not the highest scoring according to the state's criteria, then the region provide justification in the form of priorities. So what we received was nothing unique. You were using the state's priorities. So that's why we're saying if you want to prioritize those three categories above the other two, then that would be unique to your region and would be enough justification for a different recommendation than what the state, than what was the highest scoring. Is that what your proposal was just to use the state's criteria, and they weren't any different from the state's. It was just that you were going to score them, and the state's criteria are very objective, so there's no distinction. Does that make sense?
Nicolette, I'm sorry to argue with you on this, but I don't really think that makes sense, because the policies and procedures specifically states that a list of eligible projects for regional selection will be submitted to the committee, and that the members will make justification for their selections. Projects scored by a committee by the state and then submitted to a regional committee who must then use the same scores from a committee of members that we don't know. I feel like that's losing valuable local input into the selection of the region's $5 million.
Well, if you want, there's nothing in there that doesn't say that you can come up with your own criteria. But if you're going to use the state's criteria, then they're very objective, and so it would basically be you disagreeing with the state's score for an objective criteria, which is not outlined and not foreseen. If you have a different criteria, for example, if you think that effectiveness in minimizing risk, project costs and implementation, and social benefits should have a higher weight, then that is distinct, and you can do that. But if they're all weighted equally the same way the state is doing it, then what's the difference?
So the difference is, in my opinion, that the scores would be delineated from a different group of people with different considerations for the same criteria. I just think it's a little
And
naive
that's
to
not in the
believe.
policies and procedures. There, we did not intend for the regions to use the same scoring criteria, but evaluate it themselves. That is not in the policies and procedures.
But Nicolette, this is Kevin Durbin, West Baton Rouge. I hear what my friend Renee is saying over there. It is a different perspective. I mean, just because we're using the same criteria that the state's using, we may look at this through a regional lens with different eyes, and we may see different perspectives on these criteria. So I don't understand why OCD sent the comments at all. Nicolette, I'm not finished. I don't see why OCD sent the comments at all to the region the way that the comments were sent. I just think that that was poorly worded from OCD.
Well, if you look at the effectiveness and minimizing risk calculation, there is really no feasible way for you to get a different number. It's very objective. You enter in inputs. And so project cost and implementation, the criteria are very specific. So you're going to get the score. It's just, it was not, that was not in the policies and procedures. The score you're going to be having to go through like the same process and then for the same criteria, and that was not what was outlined. It was, let's say you wanted to prioritize a project on a certain bayou or a certain type of project, there's room for that, but you're going to get the same numbers that are in the state. So it doesn't meet the intended procedures. It's saving you work, and I don't see where you would get a different number, and that's why this is worded that way.
It would be a different number because it's coming from a different group of reviewers.
But the criteria are not reviewer dependent.
Okay, Nicolette, give me an example of one objective criteria that you think is not reviewer dependent.
So effective is minimizing risk. Did you see? I'll pull up the that is purely a calculation. There's no way you're going to get a different number than the state. Project costs and implementation. Social benefits. Is it in the LMI or is it not? You're not going to get a different number.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, there may be a different way the region calculates social benefits and the way the states calculate social benefits.
Well, that's what we wanted to know. How are you going to calculate it? But you didn't provide any distinguishing criteria. They're using the same criteria the state's using, and so it's just. Do you see what I'm saying? It's the same thing. It's not unique.
Okay, this is John Boudreau, Assumption Parish. I disagree because in working with these programs before, some of these areas are LMI and you have to go out and survey them to prove that they LMI because the census map does not indicate that. So from a local perspective, we know that and you do not. So there can be a different scoring criteria. The census maps are not accurate. I can tell you that with everything we do, especially as an emergency manager and dealing with COVID this past year and some of the numbers that they put out there, they're not accurate. And us at the local level know those places. And so you at the state do not know that.
And if you want to be specific in your methodology that's different from the states, that would be acceptable. It would just needs to be detailed and it needs to be distinguished, and it wasn't. So if
Nicolette, how much time does the region have to get you all an approved scoring criteria?
Till the end of today.
I mean, Pat just my thoughts, West Baton Rouge Parish. I think the region submitted the state a very valid, adequate scoring criteria that met the requirements and policies and procedures. I do not understand the comments that came back from OCD. I think they were unwarranted, and I think they were unnecessary, and I think there's just a difference of opinion, and this just all needs to be worked out.
I agree with that. I think, I really think that this is missing an opportunity for valuable public input and regional selection just way outside of what was originally presented to the committee and to the public for this program.
If you all come up with a different scoring criteria, you have that opportunity and you've had that opportunity. It's not what was submitted. What was submitted is that you're using the same criteria as what the state is using. And do you want me to pull up the criteria? I just don't see how you could get a different score. And that's not what's in the policy.
My concern, Nicolette, is that the criteria is housed within the state, yet we get very little guidance on what, who's reviewing these projects, what exactly is going into the criteria outside of the general subjects or, criteria.
Okay, I'll pull up the criteria right now so you can see.
And again, Nicolette, while you're doing that, I just want to echo what John Boudreaux said, that the data at the local level could very well be different and more accurate than the data at the state level. We're dealing with new subdivisions that are being built, several times a year in some of these jurisdictions like West Baton Rouge Parish, and those new subdivisions, which data you guys may not have access to at the state level, could very well skew the review process. But also the goal is not necessarily to come up with a different recommendation with the state did. I would like to see us agree on most of these, but there may be some subtle nuances in the local review.
Well, the state isn't concerned that you come up with the same project. It's that if you have different values, we just want to know what those are and know your method for quantifying it. That's all we were asking. And I
think the region gave that to y'all, Nicolette, and I don't understand why the comments came forth the way that they did.
What you gave to us is that you're scoring the project according to the same criteria that the state's using.
And there's a problem there? I don't see the problem.
What is different?
The local review, Nicolette, the local data, the local perspective is different than the state's data.
Which local data are you using for which criteria?
John just told you, for example, in social benefits, the census data could very well be different at ground level than what you guys have access to.
And what data source will you be using?
We'll be using local building permits and local subdivision approvals that have not been recorded by the census yet. The census is only done once every 10 years.
All right, that wasn't indicated in the submission.
Can y'all extend the timeline for the region to get approved scoring criteria?
You have until the end of the day. Tomorrow is the council.
Yeah, let me
Hold on a minute.
add in.
Yeah, go ahead, Pat.
Let me add in, with the low to moderate income, that's, we put those applications in all the time, CDBG, and John's absolutely correct. We go out in the field, we do survey work, but that's all done before the application's submitted in. I mean, so if somebody looked at a census map and saw that the low to moderate income was marginal, then they should have gone out and justified it through a survey to show that it was low to mod and then submit it with their application. But you wouldn't do that after the application was submitted. So whatever's in the application, that's the only information you could be able to use. You can't ask for somebody to give you additional information after the application's been submitted.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we're close to communicating, but we're not quite there yet. When I look at, I think there's enough information in the three criteria that we have agreed to use, which are effectiveness in minimizing risk, project costs and project implementation, and social benefits, that if we look at the explanatory information that came from OCD on how each one of those criteria are broken down, for example, there is a risk reduction value, which is given a maximum of 20 points. So we can look at the details on analysis, calculation of risk of providing attachment one. We can make a decision. Is it worth 20 points? Is a particular project, is it worth 20 or is it worth less than that? We've got a way to break this down, it seems to me, that will allow us to have sufficient local input into project selection to make it work for us. I've been trying to get my arms around this, but I think we do have information sufficient that will allow us to uniquely address every project for our region from a local perspective using those three general categories that we want to use. I'm not faulting anybody here. Maybe we weren't clear enough in our explanation of what we wanted to use and how we wanted to use it, but the information is actually here in Appendix B. And if you didn't take time to look at that, you should. That's Appendix B is the evaluation and scoring criteria for the Round 1 Watershed project. It's pretty detailed. Now, we could quibble with what should there be a 1 or should there be a 2, but we have the ability to score that based on the projects that are been approved for our region. So I'm not sure that I understand why we're getting so worked up over this. Can somebody help me out? Am I on the right track, Mr. Gordon, with this?
Well, whatever the scoring is for the state, we would have to use the scoring of the state in those three categories.
Yeah, but we could like, for example, risk reduction value. Well, a project may only score 18 instead of 20, based on our unique perspective locally.
Well,
right?
If that's the way the state rates it, correct.
So Nicolette, I think she's gonna share a screen to see how to get the points.
I mean, that makes up the total of 44 in that particular category.
That's the total amount. That's
Yeah,
correct.
but does that mean that when we look at a project for multi-jurisdictional risk reduction benefits, it either gets a 4 or it gets nothing?
The state will be scoring that, and we would have to support the state's score in those categories.
Well, suppose we don't want to do that.
Well, I mean, I think that's what.
Suppose we think that's wrong. Can we object to it and provide the reasons for the objection?
Yes, you can. You have this meeting to sort it out. I'll just say, for the effectiveness and minimizing risk, this is how that number is calculated. So it's based on the structures that's an input and a risk weight. So it's very objective. You'll get the same number. But if you want to look at social benefit, so let's see. Social benefits, here are the criteria. Project demonstrates a direct positive benefits in terms of risk reduction to persons of low and moderate income. It provides documentation that the project will benefit the residents of primarily residential area where at least 51% of residents are low and moderate income per HUD's updated LMSD or other LMI benefit determination criteria. So if you have a specific methodology that you want to use for social benefit that's distinct from this, it's fine for you to adopt at this meeting. We just need more clarification because that was not provided in the recommendation that we received.
Nicolette, what would be the process to give this region an extension on getting an improved scoring criteria? I don't think all these details are going to be worked out in this regional monthly meeting.
We can provide an extension.
They're announcing the project tomorrow at 9, so it has to be before that.
I'm sorry, Adam, I didn't hear you.
Tomorrow, like, they're announcing the project at 9 o'clock, for the statewide, project. So all the projects will be released tomorrow at 9, so I think that's where the time limit kind of is. And they can't push back that public meeting.
Can I ask,
If one of you wants to
are the
make a
regional
motion,
projects being, are the regional projects being announced tomorrow at 9 as well? Because I just want to, for the record, state my concern is not with, objective versus subjective criteria necessarily. It's that the response by OCD is contrary to what was presented in the policies and procedures, which stated that a list of eligible projects will be submitted to the committee for consideration. The committees are emphasize to determine regional priorities. So if the state is announcing projects with very little time to, and I recognize that I'm new on this, Devin was on this board for the past year, but I just find that counterintuitive, and I would hate to set a precedent of, regions in the state having to, just kind of, let the state choose what the regional projects are. I find that hard to comprehend.
Renee, this steering committee has been talking about this for a while now, and it maybe you might be caught off guard because you're joining new, but I'll show you the policies and procedures, and I thought it was clear in the letter that the interpretation of those. It's on page 24, regional selection. So it says, where's regional selection?
Do we have that document?
Yeah, I believe that, I sent Nicolette's, response 2 weeks ago, didn't I?
No, I'm talking about the policies. And
Oh,
procedures.
yeah, but I did send her response 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I didn't receive any responses from that.
Did you find it, Nicolette?
I'm looking regional words. Okay. So the regional award process will enable watershed regions that have developed a functional regional steering committee to select those applications that meet a minimum threshold score and recommend those projects to OCD for funding. So regional steering committees must complete the following steps in order to participate in the selection of watershed region projects. Once the steering committee has demonstrated completion of above steps 1 through 4, OCD will forward the list of eligible projects for each watershed region with their scores to the steering committee for consideration for funding. If the projects recommended by the region are not those projects highest under the state scoring process, the list of eligible projects for regional selection, the committee must provide written justification for their selection. So that means that if your committee is choosing something that's maybe not the highest scoring, we just want to know how you're prioritizing that project above the other. So we talked about this in previous meetings. We just need to know what your prioritization is and then the method by which you're going to make that recommendation. So
I think that works. I think that would work, Nicolette. We just need to base it on something, on some objective criteria. And I think we have been provided that information. You know, I mean, there can always be disagreement about what a regional priority is, but I think, you know, if we've got a quorum at a meeting, it can be decided by majority vote, right?
We could make a
Yeah,
recommendation.
so if you all want to change or clarify your priorities at this meeting, we can accept. It's just what was submitted didn't explain what the unique priorities were of the committee. So for example, I can just explain to you what, like in Region 3. Region 3, their committee voted that they were going to prioritize drainage improvement projects over any like flood storage or buyout, et cetera, any other type of project. That was their priority. So let's say that, you know, the highest scoring project isn't a drainage improvement project up in Region 3. Well, if they select a lower scoring drainage improvement project, we understand that's their priority. So we, you know, will accept that justification for the recommendation.
That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, Nicolette. I don't think this committee is going to sit here today and tell you we're going to prioritize channel improvements over detention storage.
I'm not saying that. So what you should. I'm just providing an example of what a unique priority would be. I'm not trying to tell you what to prioritize.
Well,
I'm just explaining.
and I guess that's the confusion, Nicolette, that several members of this committee have already expressed, is that we sent the state a document. This committee has been meeting monthly, sometimes several times a month. We had a thorough discussion. We had a vote. We sent a document, and some comments were issued by the state that I think a lot of us don't even understand the comments. You know, we sent y'all our priorities. And if you look at number 3 at the top of the page you're looking at, it doesn't say shall develop a process. It says we're encouraged to develop a process. So you're going to have to explain to me which ones of items 1 through 4 that this region has not met yet to where we can move forward with this.
Okay, well, it's just what was received, you all proposed to use the same selection criteria that the state was using. So it didn't, and those criteria for the state's priorities for selecting projects were looking at risk, looking at social benefit, looking at geography, location in a mid, looking at benefits to natural functions of floodplains. And so we did not see how your priorities were different from the state's, because you said you were using the state's criteria to score projects.
But did we go into detail with those detailed criteria you were showing earlier? Did we say we would use those exact detailed bullet point items?
Yes.
Well, and Nicolette, I have a question about the social benefits really quick. You know, the criteria in that social benefit stated that the project, you know, has an impact on 51% of residents LMI, with a total of 7 points. Is that delineated, you know, what is the range of getting 1 through 7? Because I know we have some projects on this list of Region 6 eligible projects that, you know, maybe have a larger span of impact that might, you know, impact hundreds of census tracts or one. How do you differentiate 1 through 7? So those are the kind of things that I don't necessarily think are 100% objective.
Well,
I believe as Mr. Boudreau said, you know, the valuable local input in determining social benefits, economic opportunity, et cetera, I feel like is lost when we resort to using, you know, a top-down approach to regional project selection.
All right, well, that's why we were asking for your input. It just needed to be clarified, and I can show you what we received from Region 5 where they provided clarification around similar So this is what Region 5 provided. So a number of people benefited in a project area. They gave their numerical value, how they're going to prioritize. And so if you all have special criteria you want to look at when it comes to social benefits, that's perfectly acceptable. It's just we needed it to be clarified in your recommendation. So if you want to adopt something right now, we will accept it. You have until the end of today to submit your recommendation.
Well, I don't know that we can reinvent the wheel here by the end of the day. I still think there is an opportunity for us not to set priorities in terms of specific types of projects, but I think we can set priorities based on effectiveness in minimizing risk. And there are a number of numerical issues here that can be looked at on if we evaluate a specific type project, whether it's a drainage project, whether it's lining a ditch with concrete, whatever it is, we can evaluate it based on how effective it is in minimizing risk. And then we can look at it in terms of project costs and project implementation. And there are a number of categories here we can use. We can drill down on a specific project. But Nicolette, I can't tell you today what our specific projects are even in generic terms, like drainage projects. There's so much that goes into that. But if you categorize it as effectiveness in minimizing flood risk, yeah, I think that can work. And we also look at the social benefits of a particular specific project that will come to this region so that we can evaluate it. That should be acceptable to the state, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mart, I hear what you're saying. That would be my recommendation as well, that we just up our weighting on the minimizing risk category.
Well, I think we could do that. I mean, it's already upped. It's gonna take up much more than 50% of the total of those three general categories.
Is that different than what the state? Is that different than the state's weight?
Well, we're not including some of the other categories the state used, like enhancement of natural functions, a benefit to most impacted and distressed parishes. We chose to eliminate those two and only go with those three categories we mentioned previously.
Well, that's the difference. That's the difference, Nicolette. That's why we're scratching our head, is that we are selecting these projects differently. We're weighting minimizing risk a lot higher than what the state is rating. So I'm still confused as to what the comments are.
Well, when we get the scores, broken down scores of these subcategories, we're not going to get out of 100. We're going to get the scores from just minimizing risk, the scores from project costs, and scores social benefits. So it would be out of 680 something or 60 something instead of 100.
Points, yeah, instead of 100. But if we wanted to, we could on a proportional basis, we could up it to 100 points total on a proportional basis. I don't think we need to do that. I think there's enough information here for us to evaluate projects for our region based on these three categories. And if you look at in that Appendix B, how those categories are broken down, I think that is sufficient for us to, now we can quibble, we can disagree a little bit on a point here or there, but I think we can come up with our list of projects that should be funded on a priority basis. But I can't tell you today what our priorities are. Now, in terms of, give me a project and we'll look at it. So I think what we have will work for us on a regional basis, and it'll give us an opportunity to put our individual mark on these projects, our individual score on these projects, and it'll meet what the state wants to accomplish. It'll meet what we want to accomplish. And I think we can move on with it. I just don't think I don't think we can reinvent the wheel here by the end of the day, nor do I think we should reinvent the wheel. I think we've got enough information here to make it work for us. The state will accept it. Nicolette has just said that if we take that approach. And, you know, we'll get the list of projects tomorrow, and then we can begin our evaluation process. Again, there is room for disagreement. And there's room for quibbling on, well, should he get 4 points or should he get 3 points? You know, we can put those kinds of things. It's either a unanimous deal or we put it to a vote on each separate little scoring criteria. For example, upstream, downstream flood effects gets 2 points. Well, somebody may think it gets 1. There's a lot of disagreement. Okay, we put it to a vote. Should it get 1? Should it get 2? And we can do that for each one where there is a little disagreement about. It's not going to take us very long to go through this, but I think we have to make a decision today. And I think there has been some confusion about this, and I've been sitting here listening to everything that's been said so far in this meeting, trying to get my head around it, and I think I have, and I'm trying to explain it to you the way I see it, and I think this will work for us, and I think the state will accept it. So
Mark, the question is future years, are we tied into this? Let's say we don't have time to change it now, and we take the recommendation that's being addressed now, but in future years we want to take a different approach. What happens?
Well, that's a good question, John. I mean, the state would have to provide some direction because they've already gone through the very extensive evaluation and scoring criteria process, to which, if we take a close look at it, I think can be very, very helpful to us. Now, in future years, let's cross that bridge if we get to it, John. I can't answer that today. And I don't know that the state can. I don't know if these criteria evaluation. Go ahead.
Let me put it in perspective. This is just one program. It was competitive. There were specific criteria that were outlined in order to award projects. So your decision is not binding. It the region itself obviously, I think you'll be developing a watershed plan with your own priorities and maybe with more detail. They could be different from this. This decision is just for this one program. It's not
for round one, correct?
Doesn't have any implications on future project development.
Okay, and so if necessary, based on whatever plan the region comes up with going forward, we may have to change the way we look at these projects. But for round one, which is all really we're talking about today, this is the way we ought to go. Correct, Nicolette?
That's correct.
Thank you. Any other comments?
No, I just want to concur with what John's saying, that, moving forward, maybe we should start talking about our own criteria of ranking projects in the future for rounds 2, 3, if they are competitive, and see what our priorities are and make those determinations before we get into crunch time again. And I think that's a great idea, John. I don't see any reason why we can't do that.
We don't need to do it today, though.
No, it's not today.
All right, so Do we need a motion, anything?
No, I think we've got. the
Okay,
direction
I
from
think
the state.
we have a pretty good consensus going forward, what we're gonna do. Nicolette's in agreement with the things that I have said, trying to shed some clarity on this matter. So, that being said, and there being no objections, then, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is outreach and communication. I'll turn that over to Mr. Garden for further. Pardon? Oh, the round one update.
Yeah, the round one update, of course, the projects that are funded by the state will be announced tomorrow at 9 o'clock. We'll be getting those results from the state as soon as possible. And the state, if we do get any projects, the state has asked us to put together press releases in the official journals of those jurisdictions and put on our webpage, and perhaps get quotes from the chief elected officials. And so if we do get some projects tomorrow, we're going to have some outreach to the steering committee members and try to get some of this information. Also, regional recommendations are due to the state today. So
To say will be at the end of
July 1st. Well, that's for the projects.
Okay,
That's for
all
the
right.
projects, but the actual recommendations of the scoring criteria is due
Is
today.
due today. All right, that special watershed council meeting tomorrow will be available on Zoom if anybody wants to
Yes.
attend. I intend to be online to listen to it. I think that's going to be important because we'll learn at that meeting not only what the state will spend its $60 million on, but also what projects in each region.
Well, the state will be sending us a list of the projects that we need to make a decision on.
Okay. All
Okay,
right.
that's it.
Thank you, Pat. Now, outreach action plan for Region 6.
Yeah, we've been busy making presentations to parish councils and meeting with parish presidents, and this is a list of in the blue of that we've already met with the parish presidents and administration. Orleans, we haven't met yet. We're meeting them tomorrow. And then the presentations at council have been Terrebonne, Lafourche, St. John, Assumption, and West Baton Rouge. We are lining up some additional meetings in the future. Go to the next one, Adam. And this is some of the outreach to some of the other groups that we've contacted. And BETNEP, Wetlands Discovery Center, Restore Retreat, Chittimacha Tribe, Upper Delta Soil and Conservation District, Terrebonne Rotary, Homer Rotary, Spears Group, Henry Consulting. These two are assisting us, these two groups, Spears and Henry Consulting, are assisting us in the outreach. They are also reaching nonprofits as well as other government entities. We've also met with Options for Independence, Coastal Center at Nichols, TITA, West Ascension Drainage Committee, and we'll continue that outreach as we progress during the summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I want to point out that I want to thank Kevin Durbin and John Clark for attending the meetings we had in their respective parishes with their parish officials. I accompanied Mr. Garden on those meetings. I wish I could have done more, but so I think it's important if you have the opportunity when that meeting is held in your parish to be there with Mr. Garden or Adam, as the case may be, to be there to talk about it if necessary. Okay, is that all items under that, Pat?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I know we've had a free-ranging discussion here, and I believe we do have the direction that we need. So the next item on the agenda is committee member comments. So if any of you have comments before we get to next steps,
Is that on?
what?
Okay. All right.
Well, that's the last item on the agenda, but are there any comments from committee members? All right, hearing none. Are there any, we'll go to closeout. Are there any public people on the call here where is your opportunity to make a comment if you so desire?
Hey, Mark, this is Kyle Galloway. If you wouldn't mind a brief comment.
Yeah.
I just, as y'all are discussing the scoring criteria, I think kind of in the background there is the comment I made at y'all's last meeting regarding the how y'all handle the funding limitation. And I think it's kind of on the back burner right now, but I would just encourage y'all to afford yourselves the flexibility of doing a partial funding. As I mentioned last meeting, I specifically asked OCD about that, and they responded that their guidance does allow for that as long as the project can be phased in a way that meets the national objective. And I think it's very likely that y'all are going to be in a situation where, the projects you want to fund don't add up to exactly $5 million, and you're going to benefit from having the flexibility of doing partial awards for phases of projects. So, as y'all continue to look at that process, I would encourage you to, rather than throwing out a project, if it puts your total over 5 million, allow yourself to do a partial award to get to that $5 million limit. So that's all I want to say. I'm sure y'all are ready to be done. So thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. I think we do have that flexibility. All right. Any other public wishing to make a comment?
Mark, Kevin Durbin, I just want to say real quick, some of my frustration with the state came through in the meeting today, and I just want to mention this real quick. Let me tell you the reason for some of that frustration, Mark. We submitted an application for stream gauges during this round one funding. It did not meet the minimum threshold, so it was rejected by the state. We asked for 10 stream gauges. That stream gauge project has now been taken over by the state. And instead of getting the 10 or 11 stream gauges we asked for, it looks like we're only going to get 2. So that's where some of my frustration is coming from. The whole system doesn't make a lot of sense. This is a critical piece of infrastructure that we are not going to be getting in round one. So I just wanted to share my perspective on that. Thank you.
Thank you. But, there may be an opportunity down the pike for you to resubmit on that, possibly. So
I sure hope so.
I understand your frustration, and I think there's going to be a lot of that, unfortunately. But, in this round one, this is limited funding. $100 million does not go that far when you're talking about a statewide.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that comment. All right. Upcoming events, Mr. Gordon, or key dates, which is next?
I don't know if Adam stops
Yeah.
one particular point. Okay, well, these are just the next steps. And as I mentioned, we'll continue to do the outreach. And the Louisiana Floodplain Management Conference in Houma has been canceled again. So they're going to do the mini sessions. And I'm sure some of us will be tuning in for the June, September, and December mini sessions.
All right. Well, our next meeting will be June 23rd, 2021. I guess we'll use the same format unless it just depends. We may do a hybrid.
I'd like to start meeting in person because, if we start getting into project selection, it's much easier to
do it in person.
Have all the information out and out in front of everyone, and we can work through it much easier than on Zoom. So I'm anticipating the next meeting to be in person.
Okay, well, I hope so. All right, so Pat will complete, or Adam will complete, circulate the meeting minutes of this meeting, incorporate comments and corrections to the minutes, if any, continue outreach to selected officials and stakeholders. And we look forward to receiving the round one projects for us to discuss. So that June 23rd meeting should be a very lively one.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
I do too. If there are no other issues or comments, Going once, going twice, going three times. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
This is Earl, you got it.
Thank you, Earl. Second by anybody?
John Boudreaux.
Second, Durbin.
Thank you, John. Any objections to adjournment? Well, you can't discuss that motion. All right, then, so ordered. Thank you very much for attending today. Look forward to everybody being here on June 23rd.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.